why do we make art? And how do we truly define success as artists? Welcome to this episode of I Love Your Stories. I'm your host, Hava Gurevich. Today, we're stripping away some of the pressures around art making and embracing the joy of the process itself. My guest is the talented Jaclyn Gordyan. She's a brilliant artist whose work is deeply rooted in nature. Jaclyn is also a big believer in a creative community and just started her own artist residency program. Get ready for a truly inspiring conversation about art making, the importance of play and risk taking, how mistakes are an integral part of the process, and the freedom that comes from not getting too attached to the outcome. Welcome to the show, Jaclyn. Now, a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll get right back to the show. When I started selling my art, I had absolutely no idea how to actually turn it into a business, a professional business. And then I came across art storefronts, and that was a game changer. I've been a customer now for years, and they've been instrumental in every way, every step of the way of helping me succeed. I have a gorgeous, powerful commerce website. I have marketing tools and a membership to a community that is very supportive and teaches me how to succeed as an artist. Check them out, artstorefronts.com, and tell them Hala sent you. I am so excited to have this chat with you, but more importantly, I'm excited to have a chat with you recorded because every time we have a conversation, I think to myself, like, man, we should have been recording this. This is so good. And yeah, I think it's just in part a combination, a kind of like an alchemy between like our personalities. So for this, actually, okay, just to start, so we're talking with Jaclyn. Can you pronounce your last name? Because I have
Yeah, Gordyan.
Gordyan. Okay, Jaclyn Gordyan. And so happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about you, your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a multidisciplinary artist, focusing, I would say, mostly on sculpture and painting, but I bridge into other things. And my work revolves around materials. I use a lot of organic materials in my work. I do a lot of foraging in my work, and I think the crux of what I am after in my work is this connection that we have to nature, this sort of ancestral bond of where we came from, right? And just everything you can we as a species can sort of learn and be reconnected with in that space. And I develop bodies of work that speak to different aspects of our experience as humans, and using nature as a way to sort of express that and bring it to the forefront.
And I want to add that at least the work that I've seen so far, when you say connected to nature, you mean quite literally, like nature, you bring nature directly into your studio and into your art. I've seen canvases with bark
Mhm.
and moss,
Mhm.
um, and uh,
Sometimes like a third of a limb of a branch. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and one of the things I find really fascinating, just as two artists that um, on the surface, our work looks really different.
Yeah.
Looks really different. But
Yeah.
when we start talking about what inspires us, and even when we start talking about some of our methodology for getting inspired, for coming to a creative space, it's very similar.
Mhm.
And that's just really fascinating to me that we can be looking and thinking about very similar ideas, and they sort of manifest visually in such different ways for us.
Yeah.
For me personally, opens up possibilities, seeing where you take that. Um, Tell me, like, what do you
Yeah.
do to
Go on.
get inspired? Like,
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a great question. How do we all get inspired, Hava? I usually I mean, there's a bunch of ways and they all kind of are different parts of the process, but, usually starts with journaling, sort of figuring out what is on my mind, like what's happening for me. That usually starts to develop some sort of focus and figure out, "Oh, this is something that's reoccurring," right? It's happening again and again. And whether through journaling or talking with other artist friends like this and sort of understanding where is this going? Like, let's start it just opens up the conversation a little bit more to sort of allow me to see more possibility. And then once that's happening, then I'm usually starting to create and play with materials, experiment with new things I haven't done before, because that's a big part of my practice as well. Because I mean, how on earth could I ever have used every nature type there is? There's always something new that I want to be getting my fingers in, and I think between that and, other base materials that I have, just from like an artistic perspective, how do these things play together?
Mm.
But starting usually starts sort of with like the inner thoughts and then moves into creation and playing. And then that could totally take me in another direction, right? Inspired by whatever that discovery is. That happened to me recently when I was at a residency in Newfoundland where I thought I was gonna go there to do I don't know what I thought I was gonna go there, I was staying open to the possibility, but, while there, just dove into I had this thought one day of, "What happens if I bring ocean water, right, into the work? What happens when that happens?" And just took me on this whole new discovery of, like, what happens with salt water and salt and playing with that and everything in my work, so it was just a different way to work with nature, and I feel like what I love about it is a lot of unexpected things can happen because I don't know how nature's gonna respond to what I'm doing, or how it might decay or anything like that. That always is really interesting to look in my work too.
I really, respect, like, the physicality of
Mhm.
your work and also, like, the physicality of your process, like, you actually bringing nature indoors, and the colors. Your art, has a lot of, earth tones.
Yeah.
Um, it's somewhat abstract, like, there's a lot of, like, abstract color fields. I'm looking at the one behind you specifically,
Ah, yes.
and
Mhm.
but then there's also, like, real elements and painted elements that are kind of your interpretation of nature, but also nature itself.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why I think it's so fun to talk to other artists because they see things about your work and how you and how you work that
Yeah.
you're just like, "Wow, I wouldn't have thought of talking about, like, the physicality of it before," but that makes a lot of sense, and I think the color between our work is obviously very different. That's
Yeah.
one of the things that, um, like, nature can have these really bright, bright colors, but for me, those are, like, small moments in my work, but for you, like, that is a big factor in your work, along with, like, the patterning, right, and, like,
Yeah.
pulling through those things that you see consistently, and I find that part I think maybe that's probably the biggest, like, spectrum difference between our work too, right? It's
I
like
think so. I always I love to think in terms of analogies, and it's like as if there was like this membrane across nature,
uh,
and your work exists on one side where it reflects the way nature,
mhm,
you know, comes into our world and
mhm,
enriches our lives, and we feel it, we see it, we can smell it. Like
mhm,
your work feels like you can touch it, and there's a physicality, there's a real physicality. And then, like, I feel like mine would be sort of like what's on the other side.
yeah,
Sort of like the
yeah,
inner world. I'm yeah, I love using a lot of color, but I don't usually adhere to the palette of what's in nature. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes I do, but sometimes not. And I'm kind of really always curious about like that spectrum of color that we don't see, uh,
yeah,
and how that affects the field. And so I feel like we're
yeah,
describing the same thing. We're describing the same thing, and, to best way to put it is our sort of reverence for nature and our relationship to nature
yeah,
and feeling connected to it. I know that you know, especially where you live, but you spend a lot of time outdoors, spend a lot
yeah,
of time being inspired directly
yeah.
by
Yeah,
nature.
Yes, I lived in Chicago for about 10 years, and just after a while was like, why am I fighting this? Why am I fighting these instincts just for more trees and grass? Was just how I kept saying it to myself. I was like, I just need more trees and grass in my life. So I moved out to, the woods of Michigan, if you will, and found all of the trees and grass I could ever desire. But I think to your to get back to what you're talking about with the color, there's I haven't really, like, thought about it in, like, full detail, but as you were talking about it, it made me realize that, like, to me, like, the earth tones are, like they have, like, this, like, calming effect on me. Like, I feel, like, really, really at peace when I'm in, like, a very, like, earthy space. And to me, that is reflective in my work, right? There's
Mhm.
moments of color, there's moments of these things, but they're sort of they're highlights, but they're not driving the piece for me, and I think it's because it makes me feel very calm, right? So, like, my work has this I think in order to, like, connect in a deep way, you kind of have to be in a calm space, so, like, I'm just getting after the thing that makes me feel calm, whereas you might feel very different about what that sort of evokes in you when you're using color and, like, what you're trying to pull forward, right?
Yeah.
But it's like it was a very unconscious decision to sort of, like, be in that place, it just felt true to me,
Mhm.
so when that happened, I just kept following that thread.
When I started painting, and I didn't really, like, quite understand like, I didn't have a good relationship with color yet. Like, I knew certain colors, like, lit up my brain, but I didn't really
Yeah.
know how to bring them into the painting, and so my first paintings were, all in these kind of neutrals, earth tones.
I'd
Um,
love to see the okay, sorry.
it wasn't because it was calming, it was because I felt well, there was a comfort. There was a comfort there. It was a good starting point,
Yeah,
but, it was I knew all along that it wasn't where I was headed. Um,
yeah.
Let me, shift gears a little bit, and
Yeah, your work's too punk rock for that.
I'm sorry?
I said your work's too punk rock for that. Yeah, yours has so much energy in it. I could hardly imagine yours in like the neutral
Yeah.
space.
I you know, I'm a like, I'm a child of the '80s and,
Yeah.
new wave, but at the same time that I started painting, I also really got into, like, early electronica music.
Yeah.
It sounds very lush and organic, but it's also synthetic. And my relationship to painting, like, I had from the very beginning, the fact that I'm dealing with, and I work in acrylics, plastic colors and the canvas has its like, the physicality of the materials, like, they were not organic to me, but I was
Oh,
creating something organic. So I think that, that sort of, combination of
mhm.
wanting to, explore the lush organic nature of existence, but also being really, really attracted to, like, techno techno pop
Yeah.
and, rave scene and sort of like psychedelic, influences. So that's I really think that's kind of where it was coming from, and, so in your
Yeah.
case, if you had to say, like, in 1 or 2 sentences
Mhm.
what your work is about, what would you
Mm.
say?
I think the sort of the world that we live in is very disconnected
Mm,
from us a lot of times. And I think I feel the most whole, maybe, when I'm in sort of a natural space. And once I kind of figured that out, it started to influence my work more and more. So I started creating work back in the late 90s. And at that point, it was all very like graphite, realistic portraiture, rendering type objects, right? Um, very much latching on to like the world in front of us in that way. And eventually started to go on this sort of sojourn to find my medium, whether it was did ceramics for a while, tried weaving, went to photography, went back to drawing, just did the cycle of things. And then finally, when I moved out here and I started to, I had a moment where I incorporated nature into my canvas. And I know you've heard this story before, but for everyone else, it was like this electric moment of going, oh, I can bring together the things that I've been trying to bring together in my life through my work. And I think there's just something in me that really wants to from, like, outwardly, like, yes, each body work has a different story that it's telling, but holistically, there is just this moment that I want to help people to pause with, to be like, "I want you to notice things differently. I want you to see those shadows that are happening. I want you to like, look at how that thing is arcing over that driveway," right? Like, little moments that you can have to just feel very grounded, because that's kind of that is what keeps me day to day in a grounded space, and I think, I want my work to be even if it's just the materials that you notice and the whole meaning behind the work is not something that connects with you. Just looking at something on canvas a little differently and going, "Oh, I didn't really realize how deep the grooves are on bark before and on different trees," right? Like, or I didn't understand how those grasses really like they are showing you the wind in a lot of ways. Like all those little things that, if
That's
you're
a
in a go ahead.
that's a really um I just thought of that because like I always think of your work as bringing nature and responding to nature, but it also it bridges. It
Mhm.
acts as a bridge because through your work I can understand nature more deeply.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
that's the hope. That, like
yeah.
that's, like, all I can ask for, honestly, is if I have, people that I know that have sent me texts over the years of, like, "This reminds me of your work," or, like, "I saw
Yeah.
this today, and I would never would have seen it had I not been, like,
Yeah.
thinking about your work." I'm like, "Well, excuse me while I go cry in the corner for a
No.
second because, like, wow."
Um, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit
Let's do it.
and ask you, what are you most passionate about right now?
Oh, right now. I think I've just started over the last maybe a couple of months, an artist residency here on the property, and we had our first artist who you met. He came to the open studio, which was fabulous, and more to come. But the idea behind that started. It was during the pandemic. We had some friends come and stay with us, and they were of the creative world, and there was just this like energy that was existing because they were on our property with us, and just day to day we're around, right? And we did make art, but it wasn't like kind of what focused we're talking about here with the residency. And something about that just, like, lit a fire in me that I was like, "This is it. This is how, we're meant to live, is in small groups that have, like, that sort of, like, connectedness."
Yeah.
But something about the creative energy I just felt like we were, like, living on a different plane
Yeah.
in that space. The kinda conversations we could have, the kind of feedback you can get, just the things you can build together. I mean, it was incredible. So, the seed got planted then, had that idea brewing, and then, last year I went on a residency for a full month, and that really like, the full experience that you get on a residency, especially if it's one that is that long and sort of it was in Newfoundland, which is an entirely different landscape for me, um, but the best way I can describe a residency is that it is a really spiritual experience, and I know that sounds crazy woo-woo and however you wanna read that sentiment, but there is just, like, a deep connectedness that you feel. It's just your soul feels very, very connected,
Mhm.
and that I was like, "Okay, this has to happen. This has to happen." So, this year I reached out to a couple of good friends and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna start this thing," and was intending to ask them if they knew anyone who was interested, and they immediately were like, "I want to come." I was like, "Okay." So yeah, I was like, Hava's raising her hand. Like, I suddenly was like, "Oh, so this is a thing that people do actually want. It's not just me saying I want to do this thing, right?" So we had our first go at it. It went incredibly well, even more than I thought it was going to be, because having been at a residency, I know what that's like, and I was kinda hoping for, like, maybe, like, a tenth of that on the other half, like, being the host of the residency, Turns out it's like equally as cool on the other side hosting because you're having these conversations. You're walking down to like my studio that they are in and working in, and you see things in a different way.
Mm.
It was just incredible. So I'm really passionate about building that out right now, and sort of starting to look at 2026 and what that situation is going to look like, and putting down paper what this thing actually is versus doing the fly by the seat of your pants beginnings of everything. But yeah, that would say that's probably the thing that I'm most passionate about right now.
Did you find that it changed your work as well, having Jana there?
Yeah. Yes. And yes, we definitely should give Gianna Tassone a shout out here.
Yeah.
Check her out. She's fabulous. Yes, I think it did. Just through conversation, right? We're talking about her work and the way that she's thinking about things. And then I would have her come look at my work, like the things that I was working on, and have those conversations. And there were definitely influences. She's very color based. She's also very body based in sort of how she works through her like biology and physiology. I think like how the things are connected and how they work. So not
Oh,
just the
okay.
actual things, but how they actually work together. Yeah. But we have a lot. So how you and I, right? We have the sort of the nature overlap.
Mhm.
Her and I have like the human side of thing overlap,
Yeah.
where I'm looking at like groups of people and how those groups of people operate and like how we build these like weird made up worlds together. Whereas like she's on the individual level, right? So like even finding like that kind of connected tissue, we end up having really interesting like philosophical
Yeah.
conversations where it's like, well, I know why that individual is doing that thing, but like, why does as a group are we doing this thing, right? So it goes beyond art, but
Mhm.
it also infuses back into it somehow.
I wonder if also subliminally, like you walking into your studio and you seeing like someone else's art supplies, um,
Oh, yeah.
like a process that isn't yours, but is like, oh, that's interesting.
1,000%.
Yeah.
One of the things that I consciously remember making note of, was, like, when she's working on a new piece, she'll turn her other pieces around.
Mm.
Like, or if she's in the studio and needs to take a break from a piece, she'll just, like, flip it around and then work on something else. And I was
Okay.
like, "That is a great idea.
Huh.
That's a great idea." Like, because if you look at you're not gonna see it new every time that way
Mm.
if you have it constantly looking at you, you know? But her and I have a similar process where, like, we listen to the work quite a bit, where we'll like, if you've made some moves the day before, basically your whole next morning is just, like, sitting with the work, figuring out what it needs, right? Like, what's happening here? How is this evolving versus trying like, we don't have a plan necessarily going into the work right away. It sort of evolves as you're building the piece.
Yeah.
Um but yes, definitely very influenced by that, and I think, which makes me extra excited to have other artists out too, because I feel like we all have, like, really interesting tips and tricks that we've, like, developed to kind of keep our process alive along the way.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I'm gonna say
One of the
yeah.
things I really, really miss about grad school was the grad studios and having this one big warehouse where all the grad students had their little studios, and whenever, like I mean, most of us were there 24/7,
Yes.
different
Oh,
out
man.
it doesn't matter when you go in, somebody was there, sometimes I just walk around to see what other people are doing, and there was a space in the middle for, like, an exhibition space, not a nice just, for critiques,
Yeah.
but it was a space where you could, like, put all your stuff out and have an opportunity to just, like, see it all, and sometimes I'd walk in and I'd see that from someone else, and it just was, um I can't I don't think I can quantify how much that influenced what I was doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. I
yeah,
could see that.
yeah. Um,
Yeah. There was a big impact, and she
yeah.
definitely rearranged my entire studio, and I was like, "I'm here for this." Like, it I didn't realize how much of a nature hoarder I had become until I was, like, preparing for her to come, and then the first day she was like, "Can I rearrange stuff?" And I was like, "Go for it. Do it." And it was a I'm keeping it this way until maybe the next artist come in and they rearrange it again, but, like, it does give me, like, a fresh point of view
Mm,
on the space and maybe even the work too.
yes.
Something else that I noticed, I was working very much in, like, right angles when it came to, like, how my studio was set up, And she took everything and kind of tilted it like to a 35-degree angle and I was like, "Oh, I like it, like, makes me a little uncomfortable, but I think I like that."
Mhm.
Like, I
It
think that's gonna
really
be
kind of, yeah, it energizes the space, like, it just,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I had this other, question, and it's still we're
Yeah.
still talking about the idea of, about artist residencies and just working, with other artists in a shared space or in a shared community
Yeah.
situation. Um, there's there's this other flip side of it for me, at least, where, my work, like, it goes through phases where I don't know what it's doing yet,
Mhm.
and, I kinda love that. I always love it in retrospect. At this point, I know that when there's something that's really, really failing,
Mhm.
and I can tell that it's failing because it becomes reductive, like, obvious. Like, I do the obvious things because I'm just trying to work things out, and it's a process that, um, needs I need to go through, but I'm also, like, very vulnerable during that process. It's
Yes.
not a time when I want people to see it because, like, I don't want judgment, because sometimes you have to go through the obvious things and the trite things before, because they need to come out, like, and they all need to come out, and then, you clear the field and something new will occur. And I'm
Yeah.
just curious how that kind of dynamic, get like,
Mm.
how it works itself out in a situation where you're there for, you're sharing a studio, and especially if, like, your studio partner is, like, on a roll and got something, like, really amazing
Mm.
and, happening, and they're in flow, and everything's coming together, and you're over here like, "Fuck," like.
Can
And
we swear on this podcast? Okay, great.
it's my podcast, we can.
I'll follow your lead. Uh, yes, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think, there's a couple of things that come to mind as you were saying, the sort of like the ugly phases, right? I think I'm not gonna remember the artist's name for this quote, which is unfortunate, but, she talks about getting into trouble. So,
Mhm.
like, you get to a place where you're like, "I truly don't know what to do with this thing next," and sometimes I'm just in, like, a "fuck it,"
Yeah.
right? Like, and I just do something that is, like, risky and
Yeah.
whatever, and
Mhm.
then suddenly you're like, "There it is," and I think for me, it's when I get to the place that you're talking about, I realize I've stopped taking risks, and in order to get over that, I have to take a
You have to
risk.
take risks, right, right.
And then I think the benefit in my mind of having other people around in that or
Mm.
sorry, not other people, other artists, to be very specific. Other people are not helpful. Other artists are helpful.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes watching what they're doing or even just having a conversation about what are you doing, will unlock potential for
Yes,
something.
absolutely. I'm more curious about, because, like, I went through that, my studio is in our kitchen, and
Mhm.
my boyfriend lives here now, so he sees it every day.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
and sometimes it's something that, like, he'll come by, he's like, "Ooh,"
Hmm.
I'm like, I'm just this is gonna get covered up." But he just said, "Ooh," and now I don't wanna cover it up because
Oh,
I'm like, Maybe there's something there I'm not seeing." He's just reacting,
yeah.
and he's never gonna come and say, like, "What is this mess?" So,
Sure. Sure.
so sometimes he'll come and look and not say anything, and I'm thinking he's not saying anything because it's a mess. Like, I'm getting into his head, and I'm at that stage when, um, I don't want to be influenced intentionally or unintentionally.
Mm,
Yeah, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there because that is something that I struggle with, is, allowing allowing my giving my art that opportunity or that space to just exist in its troubled state.
yeah. The influence factor
Mm.
of outside voices is a really hard one to balance, right? Because you want to have conversation about your work, but you wanna have conversation about it when you're ready or when
Exactly.
it's maybe ready.
Yes.
I think, the influence part of that, both the disruption, but the potential for like, "Oh, I like this," and you're like, "Ooh, I don't actually like that part." So, I was planning to just rip it off, right?
I really sort of took it to heart in terms of like, there are times when you allow yourself time to just play and experiment and not put any expectations on the work. Um, and, to just say, like, this isn't, I'm not making art. I'm not making art right now. Like, art might occur. Might happen, and I'm an artist, so everything I do
Yeah.
is art. I don't know, but, I'm not putting expectations on this at all. This may or may not survive. It may get cut up and collaged into new works. It may get painted over, um, or it might evolve. Is sometimes it's also just fun to create intentionally create chaos
Mhm,
in the mess just so that you
mhm.
can fix it.
Yes, that's the trouble. Get into trouble. Make it
Yeah, and
chaos.
then that
Like,
fixing, yeah.
break free of I think something about that, feeling that you're describing, like play,
Mhm,
right? Like, this is play,
mhm.
and I think good art can come from strong art can come from play because well, this piece behind me actually, I was saying to them, it's like, I feel like I've gotten to this place with this piece where I feel as though I need to make it into something. And one of them said, "What do you mean make it into something?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that just made me realize that I'm putting a definition between art and play right now, and I don't need like, I need to just open my mindset back into play versus I could tell I was, like, tightening down, like,
Yes.
that's sort of like the tightness you're talking about where you're, like, you're locking into something and you're not letting it express what it needs to express, so
Um, when you have those realizations that you do have a distinction between play and art, or that there is like this certain something that has to happen to the canvas before it's like a thing, actually a thing.
right, you're like, when does a thing go from not a thing to a thing is,
Yeah,
like, the thing that I was struggling with in
yeah.
that conversation, and this
Do you have like that thing with a white canvas, just brand new canvas? Like,
no,
before.
I find that exciting. Like,
Yeah.
I'm always, like, excited by that
Okay.
because there's no wrong moves.
Yeah. Oh,
There's
that's
no wrong moves in those first moves,
yeah.
ever.
I always feel like I need to, like, put something on there, like,
Mm,
either, like, some big color wash, which that's usually
yeah.
when my boyfriend will be like, "Ooh," and I'm like, "No, this is
Oh.
not how that's not my work."
Well, your work has, like you're talking about the physicality of mine, but I think your work has, like, so much structure to it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're showing these, like, intensely structured, like, inner workings that I could see how in your head you wanna fast forward to
Mhm.
that part.
Yeah.
Like, I wanna visualize that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for me, my, like, freeze up usually comes later, right? So this piece here probably has, like, 7 to 15 layers on it of just moments that I've been doing things. So now it's like, okay, I've had so many layers now. Like, what is this? What's happening here? Right? Like and I think in that moment, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that I'm talking more than I'm listening to the
Mhm.
work. And listening is what needs to happen. Right. Because in my head, I'm like, well, I
Right.
need to march towards something tangible that can be something. And I realize that's not the mindset to be in. That just becomes then you're just clamping down like we talked about. So
But that entire process, all of it, the
yeah.
play, the intentional trouble,
Hmm.
the realization of what's happening, the walking it back, the walking it forward, and all of it, that whole process, like, in the end, it's all embedded in the work,
Yeah.
right? In all the layers, like, I was thinking about that the other day because a lot of times, like, I'll paint over entire sections.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
times, I will cut out a canvas, and I want to collage them onto another canvas, but then sometimes I'll go and paint over them
Mhm,
afterwards and
mhm,
change them, and I think about that, like, as layers of reality, like, the initial underpainting is still there.
mhm.
Uh, the the canvas, the whatever I collaged, that
Mm.
image is still there,
Yep.
plus the paint that's on top of it, and plus whatever is on top of that. Like, it's all still there.
Mhm.
And it's not all visible, like, in the finished work, but it's visible in the process. It's visible in the becoming the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the more I think about that, the more it helps me, feel good about all of the, trials, all of the mistakes, all of the things that I paint under and over and cut up because it's all there. And, so I had this, like, like a thought experiment, because I don't know what it's going to be before I start painting, and I suspect that's the same for you. You don't have a vision in your head of what the art's
No.
going to look like. If you could, like, if you could close your eyes and have, like, fully visualized, a complete work of art of yours,
Mhm.
and then just snap your fingers and have it appear all fully assembled,
Mhm.
would you still be doing it?
Mm. Am I allowed to play with it after it's in front of me? What are the rules here, Hava? Uh,
Um, well, I think no. I think that's in this particular question. In this
no, I
particular
mean, no,
question.
no, because
Yeah,
that's not to me, that's not making art, that's looking at art.
exactly. That's
That's like going to a gallery.
yeah,
Yeah.
just looking like it for an artist as an artist, for me, it's all about the process.
Mm.
And if I could just, you know, think up like some fantastic, colorful
Mm.
imagery
Mhm.
and have it appear, like, yeah, first maybe, like, the first couple of times, it's like, "Ooh," but after a while after a very short while, it's like, that's not I'm not an artist. I don't wanna be an artist if that's all I'm
Yeah.
doing. Like,
Yeah.
if you take away the process because that's where everything happens.
Yeah.
That's that's the place where you get to sort of think about the ideas and
Mhm.
feel the excitement of something coming
Yeah.
becoming. Um,
Well, I think the discovery and the process of resolving a piece is, like,
yeah.
so satisfying and
Oh, yeah.
frustrating at the same time, and I feel like if we were robbed of that as artists, like,
Mm.
I don't know if we would be artists, we'd find something else to satisfy and frustrate us. Like,
Right.
I think that's, like, the greatest itch that we're trying to scratch
Yeah.
is, like, how do I get closer to that? And I think
Mhm.
the I had to separate a couple of thoughts that you were saying because for me, like, if you were to ask me, "Is it the process for you?" And I think I probably would say no, but if I think about it, at the heart of it, it's me being in the studio making the work is the thing that keeps me here in a lot of ways. But my vision for what I want my work to feel like, is always gonna be ahead of what I can do today.
Yeah.
So, I'm always kind of pushing more and more towards
Oh,
that
I love
vision.
that. Wait, say that again.
Well,
That
I
was
can't take credit for it because I think I got it from my mentor, Ty, but, my vision for what I want my work to be is always gonna be ahead of what I can do today, and you have to be okay with that
I
generally going
love
into the
that.
studio.
I
Yeah.
love that. That is so freeing.
Yeah.
It's freeing and it's also, like, very, motivating
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think, like, it is. It is, and I think it just helps you realize you're not a failure today because you can't do the thing that you ideally want to do,
Mhm.
and that vision's gonna change the whole time that you're creating, right? Like, everything you discover is always changing that vision,
Ah,
and something you had said earlier reminded me of, you were talking about like, when you're working on this is just play, right? And we were talking about sort of that mentality of everything. It reminded me of a something I told myself really early on when I started to sort of, like, start to share my work because I could sense that I was starting to, like, feel a certain pressure to do a certain thing with my work. I just kept telling myself, like, "This is all an underpainting." Literally everything, and, like and then suddenly I was like, "Isn't that how I should be approaching life also? Shouldn't
Yes.
I also be approaching life as though this today is the underpainting for tomorrow, and it's just gonna keep evolving," right? Like,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, damn, that's helpful." I actually have it tattooed on me now because it's stuck with me for so much for so long.
Yeah.
But
Um,
it just helps. It's like things like that are so helpful to
mhm.
keep in mind as you create work, have successes, right? Because you're gonna have failures that go along with it, and you just have to, like, put them on equal playing fields, right? Like, this one and the other gonna both happen.
Yeah. So that actually segues nicely to my final question, which is
Mhm.
like for you personally, how do you define success as an artist?
Mm. The best way I can probably articulate it is to keep showing up to the studio and making work, and knowing that not all the work's gonna be strong, not all the work's gonna see the light of day for others, but success is to keep working, to keep making, to keep evolving. So showing up to the studio and keep making work, I think, is
I
the
love that.
only way to be a successful artist, however you wanna determine it, but for me, that's it. Like, the days that I show up, I feel like a success.
I love that. I love that. I love that it's so based on um you and your journey
Yeah.
and dedication to the craft, rather than any end product and certainly any kind of like monetary compensation for that end product.
Yeah, totally, and I don't wanna, like, it if art is a part of, like, who we are and, like, how we sort of, like, base our identity, right, like,
Mhm.
as an artist, like, why would I give somebody else the power to say if that identity is valid or not, you know? Like,
That's so
it
true.
it should be only my I should get to say that.
Yeah.
So, having goals is interesting and one thing,
Mhm.
but it's not gonna be a success metric for me.
Right. Absolutely. Uh, that is, I think you can take that statement and expand it to life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't you feel like so like lucky and privileged to have art as a way to like
Yes.
work out life?
Oh, I don't know how anyone else does it.
I don't know, but yeah, it's just, and what's really sad about it is that it's like, um, it's not something that is just for the few and the privileged. Like anybody can do that. If
Yes.
you apply those principles that like to be a successful artist, all you gotta do is show up and make art.
Yeah.
And that when you do, it will like help you like in every other aspect of your life.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. Yes.
Period. Um,
And I think in different ways too, right? So if it's a process, right? Like you're in flow and it helps your mind be at ease and you're present in that space. And then have a conversation about that, right, with other people. Like that's incredibly powerful.
it's unfortunate that it gets narrowed into this career path. And if you
Yeah.
don't and if you don't, like, um if you're not doing that, if you're not selling your work or if you're not showing your work or if it's not, like if it doesn't have that quality of what is considered art right now, then, why are you doing like I mean, it is a part of it, and it's really wonderful to be able to sell your work and
Mhm.
possibly, make a living doing that for those. But it's so much more than that, and it's so much more primal than that.
Yeah.
Um,
It took me a few years after I finally figured out, like, my medium, if you will, right, with,
Mhm.
like, organic, to actually call myself an artist. I never really felt confident in my, like, wandering years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to people feeling that way, and it if you feel like you can't articulate what you do in, like, a deep, meaningful way, you're like, "I'm not an artist," and it's like, it doesn't matter if you can or can't, it's just, are you doing it? Are
Mhm.
you creating work? You'll get there,
Yeah.
but call yourself an artist along the way, and you'll feel better,
Right.
generally, I think.
As an artist and a creative, it's a holistic it's a
Yeah.
life. It's my life, and it comes it and it there's different aspects of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you learn about yourself when you have a conversation with someone that's going through something similar.
Yeah.
Sometimes you learn about yourself when you're talking to someone with an diametrically opposed view. Um,
Well, then you're actually having a discussion, right? If you have different points of view
exactly.
versus just agreements.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to say that like you have to take what somebody else does like wholesale. There can
Exactly.
be little things that you're like, okay, well, most of that did not work, but this one thing right here
Exactly.
really did for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
that's, I think as humans, we want to look for commonalities.
yeah, there's
So,
like psychological safety in that, right?
yeah.
So,
Because, we work alone
hmm
in our thoughts. And maybe we have well meaning family and loved ones who try to offer support in some way that they know how, but it's not necessarily what actually is, registers as support. But speaking to another artist, it's like we're speaking words and somebody can listen and understand the words, but another artist can hear the deeper meaning behind that and, and relate to it on that level and be like, "Yeah, I've had those experiences too," and it's so reassuring to know that it's normal. It's part of
yeah.
being an artist.
Yeah, the whole like, every time that happens, which is every time you're struggling with something, another artist is like, "Yes, absolutely." It's like, to me, it's like somebody whispering, "Keep going. That's
Yeah,
fine."
yeah. It's a really good place to end, even though we could keep going, but thank you. This was so great. I love the fact that it wasn't like I didn't have questions ahead of time. Like, I knew that I didn't have to, like, prepare for this conversation.
No, not for us. No way.